When you're learning a new subject, you're trying to establish a mental model and build muscle memory. If you're thoroughly trying to learn this subject, gain some sort of expertise, and establish mastery, you know it's going to take time, effort, and many repetitions, especially if you're me. But you don't need someone on the internet to tell you that. Hi, my name's Eric. I'm a developer advocate with EventStore. This video is part of a series that will cover some basics and best practices to aid you on your event sourcing journey with EventStoreDB. Let's just set the stage and make sure we're all on the same page. Is that cool? Cool. Now, unlike traditional data storage approaches, no data is ever lost when event sourcing. And that's because we're using a purpose-oriented database, such as EventStoreDB. We're not using some other technology that wasn't meant to store data forever, or something that's not built with event sourcing in mind, such as EventStoreDB. If you need any more clarity on why that matters and the impact it can have, we do have more content on that specifically in written and video formats to help you out. Now, so instead of overriding the current state with an update statement in a database table, you could record the result of each business operation, such as placing an online order, depositing money into a bank account, or reserving a ticket. We call these results an event. It's a fact, it's a historical record, but that is an event. Now, all those associated events that have occurred for a specific business process are grouped into a sequence called a stream. Now, a stream of events in retail could be adding an item to a digital shopping cart, adding another second different item, removing that second different item because you realize you shouldn't spend that money right now, and so on, right? Those are sequential events. These event streams provide a rich history of what has happened and why, enabling a multitude of benefits compared to our traditional data storage methodologies. So now that we've recapped some core definitions and primed our conversation, let's go into some of the do's and do nots. Now, first up, we have CRUD sourcing. The create, read, update, delete set of operations is a really common way to style applications with traditional databases. Having built up and held that mental model for years, it really is no wonder that developers newer to event sourcing may fall back into old habits as they begin their journey, whether they know it or not. Now, more specifically, what may be the most common mistake is naming events with CRUD operational names. Shedding this mental model, like learning any new technique, just takes time and practice, and hopefully watching this content. Events don't just encapsulate a change that the business cares about, they also capture the intent of why it happened. How do we ensure our events convey this intent? We avoid using technical terms like CRUD, and we use the language of the business, which you're going to hear me say quite a bit. Let's go over some examples in the e-commerce domain where products are being sold on an online marketplace. So what I would consider a bad event name is item created. It doesn't really tell a whole lot. It's very technically oriented. If an end user, business user, stakeholder sees item created, they may ask something like, oh, so it's complete, it's done, it's finished? You have everything you needed since it's been created? Right. It doesn't really tell much of what has happened or should be happening up next. Compare that to something like SKU registered. A SKU, or stock keeping unit, is effectively, a SKU registered is effectively saying, hey, this product identity that we call a SKU, it is now registered in the system. Details haven't been filled out yet, but the product identity, the SKU, has been registered. No one else can take it. No other product can take it. Again, just that little bit of difference. It may not seem like much, but let's go to the next example, and maybe this will help convey this. So instead of saying item updated, which doesn't tell a whole lot, you may want something like inventory decreased, inventory increased, maybe price adjustment because sales started, or listing details adjusted, or listing title changed. Again, change isn't the most descriptive, but by having other words and using the language of the business, which I promised we would say one more time at least, it's really mission critical for event sourcing, because if you're not able to capture that intent and get the why, there are other benefits compared to traditional storage methods, but you're throwing out this giant bonus, this giant strength that event sourcing brings. So if you're someone who's used to or familiar with or is considering using a change data capture technology, and they certainly have their place, but using that CDC instead of event sourcing, I would ask you, okay, if you see a row updated and a value is changed, are you really understanding what's happening and why? That's where event sourcing kind of is strong. You're able to differentiate it against a targeted entity and then tell exactly what the next step should be, because you're describing what has happened in a process. Now that process may split up, right? It may fork or what have you, but by having well-designed names, you're able to convey the intent, what's happened, why, maybe something failed, and that needs to be part of the name. That's a whole nother topic. But naming in software is very difficult, absolutely, but it's imperative that when you're naming these events, you're effectively naming the business operations. You should work with the business on what they should be called. And that may not be something that feels intuitive or natural, but learning this skill and in picking it up and trying to work with the business really, really is unlocking one of the many strengths of event sourcing. So all of this is to say that a regular change in a traditional data storage methodology doesn't provide intent or context compared to event sourcing. Let's talk about modeling an event. So event sourcing is more than just a way to persist data. Really, it enables you to build applications closer to the business. That isn't to suggest you should pass your keyboard over and have your subject matter experts or the business structure the event or dictate what everything should be named in case it's a bad name or repetitive or anything, right? But point being is that you can leverage and use the language of the business and that knowledge they have to influence the technical implementation of that business process that you're capturing, as opposed to mapping basically a bunch of fields, right? And using technical traditions and paradigms and these technical constraints that you're worried about with your implementation, and you're now losing that context of the business and what's happening of that process, either immediately because it's not captured, or it's lost with time because there's no real good descriptors there with naming and such. And we've all inherited systems that don't seem to make much sense, or you kind of have to decipher things every time. And event sourcing can help avoid that tragedy. So it's really not just a boon to the business, but it's a boon to developers as well by modeling these events well. And again, thinking about the constraints and time of capture, what's important in that moment. Is it going to come up again, right? Do we need some redundancy, things like that? So one quick thing I want to mention, and there are certainly a wealth of resources out there if you want to dig into it, but there are some really cool modeling techniques, some methodologies, such as event storming and event modeling, and some other workshop methods that are popping up these last few years that really help bring together stakeholders and the development teams so they can help understand and map out what's happening in that problem space. Again, event storming and event modeling are kind of the forerunners, the big ones right now, but you should absolutely look into these things. This isn't the video for that. But let's look at some simple mocked up events. It's going to be written in C#, but if you're familiar with statically typed languages, it shouldn't be too bad. So we have the first event, it's inventory decreased, and there's just 3 fields, effectively 3 properties. There's a SKU, which again, that's the language of the business. It's effectively a product ID or item ID. There is an integer for amount decreased because this event is saying, hey, the inventory was decreased. So now you're expecting some sort of value as to what it's going to change by. And then there's a reason. It's a string. Now, one thing that can definitely get you, bite you in the rear is having enumerations or reasons that are coded to numbers. Just be a little wary of that, because are those numbers going to change? Are they really conveying? Do you need to have some sort of map for every time you serialize or deserialize? It's constantly being referred to. It's just a dangerous route to go. So having something like a string is certainly the preference a lot of the time, but again, it depends. Maybe your runtime or language or business dictates something else, right? Similarly, like inventory decreased, we have inventory increased, effectively the same event, just with amount increased as the integer name. And then we have something that's a little different. We have inventory adjustment recorded. And I brought this up because maybe you're in a slice of the domain, slice of the business or organization where you don't need hyper descriptive events, or you don't need events to capture if inventory levels are going up and down. You just need to record it. And that part of the business isn't mature enough or needs as rich or descriptive events as you see elsewhere. Stumbling over my words a little bit, but again, it just depends. So in this case, inventory adjustment recorded, you have the SKU, you have the adjustment, so that could be positive or negative. You also have some redundancy, which says, hey, the total in stock as of now with that change. And this is something I see in a lot of places, because if you're looking at a stream of inventory related changes, it's really nice not just to see plus 100 when a shipment comes in, or -1 when something is sold. You actually also have that total alongside it, and that's very beneficial, and also allows you to do maybe some calculations and determine, hey, is this number correct? Where for those that are unfamiliar, you might have someone in the warehouse doing inventory checks once a day or once a week, just to double check that you have the correct amounts. And that's, again, kind of going into the e-commerce domain a bit, but you might want some redundancy. And again, we see that reason there. But that's effectively a different way to look at the same type of change that's happening in a system. Do you need events that are a bit more granular? Is that what your business needs? Can you react to them better, right? By having a listener looking for inventory increased? Do you need that discrepancy, that difference? Or can you just have one event to kind of capture the pluses and minuses? Now, one thing I do want to call out here is, and you can notice in these very simple examples, is that there's no rich objects or value objects or complex types. And that's effectively the simple reason is that you want to reduce any difficulties or mischances that could happen when it comes to serialization and deserialization, because you may have one part of the business working in one language or runtime, and then having another part working in another. And really, you just want to keep things a bit more primitive and simple, easier to read, right? Where we have that string or that reason is a string compared to some number that you would have to look up, etc. So there really is no simple winner when it comes to how to design events. And by using methodologies, again, such as event storming or event modeling and working with the business, that is your best bet for success. How many events do we need? Do we need to be more granular? Can we have them be a little bit more generic? But again, you can also evolve events. So if you're realizing, oh, we need something more descriptive, or we need multiple events, instead of just an inventory adjustment has been made, there are ways and patterns that we also have content on how do you migrate to newer events, right? How do you evolve those events? So that's something that people shouldn't be afraid of. You don't need to solve everything and be 100% correct on your first event sourcing application. I mean, That whether you're new to event sourcing or other paradigms or technologies, I mean, who gets it right on their first try? Obviously, we're here to help, but you shouldn't be afraid of knowing that things need to change in the future. Let's talk about event streams. If there's one tip, best practice, principle, suggestion that should at least be considered, if not always done, it's to keep your event streams short. Why is that? Well, the long and far more detailed answer is in an excellent article we have on our website titled Keep Your Stream Short, Temporal Modeling for Fast Reads and Optimal Data Retention. It's great examples and goes over all that good stuff. The short answer for this is that it can just keep you out of trouble on several fronts. So, as you now know, no data is lost when you're event sourcing. You record all the changes that occur in a business operation, you record them as an event, and that's great. Over time, however, how's that going to look? Might not be a big deal if you're recording a few things a day or an hour or what have you, or even hundreds. Honestly, EventStoreDB can handle a whole lot of events, but let's go back to our e-commerce domain and think about maybe a single stream of events for each product. And that anything related to that product is in that stream. So that's inventory information, it's price changes, that's listing data. If you're selling on multiple marketplaces, that could be a lot. That could be sales information, marketing campaigns. It's just a lot of responsibility on a single stream. So if you need to aggregate that data to construct your model and make decisions, you might be waiting a lot, depending on, again, how many events there are. And by having everything, so many things being set in that stream, it's probably going to get pretty long. So if you think about like the most popular item a marketplace would have or that you would sell, you might have a lot of changes there. Let's think of another example, specifically one that's referenced in the article. It talks about a cash register. So the stream isn't focused on the cash register, but rather the cashier's shift. So you're really thinking about like a process, like a verb, not a noun, not the cash register, this mechanical thing. You're thinking about, okay, there's a person and they have a shift, and there's going to be a certain amount of changes that are done, and now you can allocate responsibility on that person. And just by thinking about it from like a temporal point of view, things kind of start to fall into line almost naturally. So if we think about other domains or industries such as finance and accounting, think about like when the books are getting completed, or closed rather, the books are being completed. A lot of those operations are done monthly, quarterly, and annually. Think about the stock market. There's an opening and a closing time, and they're very important. And really the only operations that happen are during that time frame. So really it goes back, and I keep saying it goes back to speaking and working with the business and using their language and understanding and leveraging their knowledge. That way you can model things, specifically the constraints that they have to adhere to, more appropriately. So by doing so, it also makes, because a lot of things are done temporarily or focused on time, it makes your streams shorter as reflecting upon those business operations. So really there's just like a caveat of benefits by working with a business, figuring out how they do a start and an end to certain operations, or how they frame their workday, work week, whatever. Really, it can, if you model your streams after that, it can save you a lot of headache and heartache maybe as well. But I would check out that article for more. And that about does it for this entry, this first initial entry of a high-level look of best practices and do's and do nots, and a guide for events and event streams. So let's recap some of those points that we made, right? There's crud sourcing, which is something that is very easy to fall into if you don't know better. Many of us work in crud-related systems or grew up with that mental model, and it can be a little hard to shake, absolutely. but by working with the business, understanding their point of view, their terminology, their language, what's of value to them, constraints and invariants they may have. I'm going to keep saying invariants. It's such a fun word. But being able to name and model events by working with the business is really a secret, a superpower of event sourcing, and really should be leveraged because it allows you to model things from the business more accurately than traditional approaches where we're thinking about ORMs and fitting things into effectively a glorified spreadsheet. So yeah, just leverage that opportunity, and data redundancy is okay. You know, if you need to store something of value in an event because that's what the business sees as provides context and provides value, then do so. If you've been in the API world, you know, you already know that you want to avoid complex types because of serialization and deserialization, but it's always a good reminder. Events, you know, ideally maybe should be small, but sometimes just because of the nature of a business operation, they need to be a bit more rich. So really, small is okay, but event size, it depends, which is something we love to say, right? Now, when it comes to event streams, shorter generally is better, and a strategy to help with that is by modeling things temporally. So by focusing on the time, the life cycle of a business operation, the start and end, because a lot of operations from the business already have those, and they may not call the start and end those specific words. Words are tough, but you might be surprised that, oh yeah, we do wrap things up every month or quarter or annually, or we really should look at the shift of a cashier. That's much easier than just having a single stream for a single machine or person, perhaps. So again, modeling things after the business can't be overstated enough. Really, that's the big takeaway here. But yeah, there will be more guides in the future about projections, read models, write models, and other things I'm clearly forgetting, but we'll have more in-depth guides as well. We already have articles and content on the website that you should check out that we referenced during this video. But yeah, if you have any questions or comments, obviously let us know. We want to be able to cater this content towards what you're interested in and have questions about, and help you level up in your event sourcing journey, ideally with EventStoreDB. So until the next entry, thanks again. Have a good one.